What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Zamboni. I am an herbalist and astrologer, and it is time to talk about the astrology of the week ahead. Thank you, as always, for being here for another week. Thank you for hitting me up on Patreon. Thank you for sending me a tip via Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. Thank you for going to Spotify, Tidal, Pandora, and checking out Can't Help Myself. Thank you for being in all of these places. Thank you for checking out the podcast. I always forget to plug that one. Check it out. What is the Time is the name of that joint. It's in all the places where you might find a podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Let's talk about the astrology of the week ahead. This week is we're still in like happy fun times with Libra, you know what I mean? So there's some nice stuff that's going on here. First is Mercury is moving out of Virgo and into Libra. Typically, I don't like Mercury moving out of Virgo as much because Virgo is a home placement for Mercury. Mercury is very strong in Virgo. However, this particular Mercury with the retrograde and the station, it's opposite to Neptune, and it's been like, and it's under a square from Mars and all this. It's like, this is not Mercury's favorite place to be. As Mercury moves into Libra, then it's going to be there in Libra with Venus, who is also in Libra, who rules that place. So this is a much more comfortable dynamic. Also, as soon as Mercury moves into Libra, then it's going to oppose Jupiter. And opposition, as I've said before, is plenty tense, can be difficult. There can be some like back and forth. There can be some push and pull with that. But you know, like, at least it's Jupiter. It's trying to improve. With an opposition to a benefic, we're going to look at stuff like tough love or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's ultimately love down in there, even if it's uncomfortable or there's some difficulty around it, right? So to see Mercury moving into Libra looks like it definitely wants to help or try some things out that might be, somewhat helpful or something like this. This is, to my mind, pretty helpful because, so this is going to initiate, this is going to participate rather in a big grand trine that we have for a lot of the week this week. So what we've got going on here is the Sun and the Sun and Venus in Libra are moving into a trine with Saturn in Aquarius and with Mars in Gemini. So there's Saturn, Mars, Venus, Sun, Mercury, all in a trine aspect together. And toward the end of the week, we're going to get the moon in Gemini also, which is just going to sort of like it's going to highlight that grand trine. So whenever I talk about trines, I talk about help, I talk about support, I talk about friendliness. You know what I mean? There's like, we can think about the way that a tripod is the most sturdy. Like four legs is less sturdy than 3 legs is, right? Everybody's been in a chair where you could juku, right? But a tripod doesn't have that problem. A tripod is always sturdy. Now, sometimes it'll be like off to the side or something like that, but on the ground, it's always sturdy. And so there's something really, sturdy and supportive and possible with this whole situation. And in air signs, we're definitely going to be looking at negotiations. We're going to be looking at, this definitely wants to come to an agreement. We can remember that the Sun and Venus in Libra are like, there's something there that really wants to come to an agreement, to harmony, to accord or something like this. Venus is in domicile. Saturn is also in domicile. Saturn also has its exaltation in Libra. So this is really if we can hash it out, if we can get some things worked out, get some ideas going, this looks real good for the ideas. This is like prime time for write down 10 ideas every day and expect that 9 of them are going to be garbage, but one of them might not suck. This is that area. There's a lot of ideas to be had here. We can remember that Saturn is still square to Uranus, right? That's not comfortable for Saturn. Saturn doesn't really like that situation. However, Saturn is so well supported outside of that I feel like the Uranus piece feels less like crisis and more like innovation. It feels more like possibility. What Uranus does is breakups, breakdowns, breakthroughs. It wants to sort of switch the whole game up. It wants to shake things up and all this sort of stuff. That has been problematic to Saturn because Saturn is trying to build structures and organizational efficiency and all this sort of stuff. Uranus can throw a wrench into that program. But because Saturn is now in a position which is well supported from Libra, well supported from Mars and Gemini also, right? So if we can think about Mars and Gemini as being action oriented, wants to handle business, wants to do stuff, all that sort of thing, then we can see that Saturn is really in a good place to take that break up, break down, break through kind of input and turn it into, okay, well, so what I was doing wasn't working, but now I have an idea that I hadn't even properly considered before. And so maybe I can move in that direction as well. Now, it's important to remember throughout this process that also that Mars in Gemini is slow at this point. Mars is not moving very quickly. So this gives us the impression that like whatever actions are like sort of set into motion at this time, they don't move very quickly. They don't, and we're definitely going to have to review all this stuff. We're at a point where like Mars is going to have to go back and check all this territory out 2 more times after this, right? So we're definitely not looking at like making moves and handling business, right? But we might be in a good place for, like I said before, negotiation, for finding agreements in some kind of way, like, especially Saturn in Aquarius is so like, there's a lot to do with law and order and with that sort of placement. Saturn in an air sign definitely is sort of trying to negotiate what we think is true or what we think is right. And, we get into moral and ethical concerns and how should we legislate around that and that sort of thing in this sort of space. Getting that overcoming trine from Venus as well as the sun, and the sun is like the king or the emperor. It's the sovereign, right? The light that wants to shine out in the world. Unfortunately, that light is a little bit, it's overcast on that Venus. We can't see Venus in the sky right now, which is a bit of a bummer. It sort of like we can't do any like talismanic elections or anything like that during this time. But Venus is still in Libra, is still in domicile, and so is able to retain its ability to do Venus things, harmony, beauty, grace, elegance, accord, all that sort of stuff, and there's this sense of like reaching out to the other, like I really don't want it to be all the problems, and so, like, it feels like teamwork. It feels like cooperation with this grand trine situation. Things are not always going to feel like this. We're getting ready to move into a time where, it looks, there's major disruption on the way, right? As we move into eclipse season and as stuff starts to move into Scorpio and all that sort of stuff. But in the meantime, right now, like there definitely seems to be an ability to talk and more importantly, to listen to each other. There's really like, if we can remember that we are friends, if we can remember to laugh together and that sort of things, like it's this sense of like, we're all in it together. We're all like a feeling of brotherhood, which feels so like trite and annoying, but is also true, like there's definitely possibility for that in this sort of space. I also really feel, like I don't know, if there are problems around this time, if there's drama going on during this week, then I feel like it's more bark than it is bite. You know what I mean? Like there's some bite on the way probably. But this week, if there's drama going on, it's going to be a lot of sort of like posturing and that sort of stuff. As posturing takes place, then that sort of it can confer an advantage to the one who would, be aware what the right words are and be aware of everyone's, so like I did a reading recently for somebody who was in a job situation and she was like, I can't work under the supervisor anymore and I gotta and so I might have to quit, but I don't have the money to quit. And there's all like that sort of situation was going on. And it turned into, we asked the cards about it and it turned into like, you need to solve everybody's problem. You know what I mean? Like not just your own problem, but you need to solve your supervisor's problem and their supervisor's problem so that so that you can be comfortable in your own space. This looks like a real good week to make that kind of negotiation take place, to get everybody all on the same page and at least pretending to smile together. You know what I mean? I don't know. Let me know how it goes for you. Send me a comment, and next week, put a comment on this one and let me know how it goes. Also put a comment. Shout out to Johnny Feliciano for sending me all these hearts and whatnot. I really appreciate all y'all. Peace and blessings. I'll check y'all next time.